Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. Taog's Hangar has finally released the much anticipated Bell 205 or UH-1H Huey. I've been flying it for a little bit now, and I think without a doubt that it is one of the best, if not the best, helicopters for Microsoft Flight Simulator at this time. Full disclosure, I have been working with the developer, doing a little bit of beta testing, and they did provide me a copy to review and to test with, but I'm always going to give my honest opinion, and I'll tell you what I do like, what I don't like, and generally how it flies. And I've never flown a Huey in real life, but I have experience in Robinsons, and I'm a rated private rotorcraft pilot, so I can compare it a little bit to how a two-bladed teetering rotor system helicopter that I do fly in real life flies compared to the Huey. Let's get started. I'll start off with my dislikes. It's a very short list, so I think that it's going to make the most sense to talk about it first. There really is only one thing that I am not fond of, and that is the lack of vibrations in the cockpit. Helicopters vibrate, and especially going through ETL, the transverse flow effect, not only does it cause a little bit of a right roll, but it causes a bit of a shake that you feel in your butt when you exit and enter ETL. So there's really not a lot of indication, other than needing to push the cyclic forward, that you're going through ETL. The vibration's not there. There was some vibration in the panels from his previous offering in the Llama, but I don't see much vibration here. There is a little bit, but it's just not very pronounced, and I would like to see it updated, and that's something that's been in discussion on the developer's Discord channel, so we'll see what happens. Now we'll move on to talking about the things that I do like, which is pretty much everything about this helicopter. It's great in so many ways. The first flight that I took, I got in and I picked it up into a hover, and I did a pedal turn and it started sinking, and I was immediately like, yeah, this is great. This is how it should be, because little things are happening with the flight model that happen in real helicopters that don't necessarily happen in some of the other helicopters for Microsoft Flight Sim. Or if they are happening, they're too subtle to notice. So the other thing that I will note is that this is fully using the native Asobo or Microsoft Flight Simulator flight model and dynamics. So everything is within the sim itself. Now it does have RBS or retreating blade stall, and it does have VRS or vortex ring state. And if you stick around to the end of the video, I have a couple of moments where I do demonstrate each of those, and I'll talk about it during those phases. You can also see that it has a tablet with a lot of options. But the options are different between the civilian and the military models, so it comes with 3 versions. There's 2 civilian versions, high skid and a low skid version, and then there's the UH-1H military version. And there's a slew of antennas and weapons hardpoint mounts that are on the military version that aren't on the civilian version, and vice versa. You can't put the water tank or the Bambi bucket on the military version. It does come with a detailed manual, and it also has a couple of extra PDFs that go through the before engine start flow, as well as the startup and run-up flow, as well as the shutdown flow. Now, a flow is something that pilots have developed from checklists. It's sort of a combination between a method and a checklist, and it's a repeatable pattern that you do in the aircraft to check all of the checklist items. And then you would pull out the checklist after your flow just to make sure you didn't miss anything. But you do your flow the same way every time in the cockpit, and it becomes a routine. That way you don't miss anything for each phase. Now, there are options for the gauges. I guess not for the gauges, but there's a modern avionics option which replaces the main 4-gauge cluster with a G3X, and then you can also turn on the Garmin handheld GPS, and you see that in the middle of the dash in these videos, and it works very well. And there has been talk on the Discord about adding a couple of things like the transponder, and I don't know if they're going to add a 530, but there are things that are being worked on for the first and second update. Also, it will be coming to the marketplace and Xbox, but it has not been submitted yet as of recording. I'm not sure exactly when it will be submitted, but I know it will be soon, so it will be coming to the marketplace. I would say before the end of summer. Don't quote me on that and don't hold me to it, but that would be my guess. No, I find the flight model to be very good, and it matches my real world experience in Robinsons. It flies like a big R66, in my opinion. And that makes sense to me because it's a very similar rotor system. It's a two-bladed teetering rotor system. Both ships are prone to mass bumping. Not something you really have to worry about. You don't want to unload the disc, so you avoid negative G loading. Basically, you don't push the nose forward at the end of a climb. If you feel yourself getting light in your seat, that's bad. That is how you encounter mass bumping in a two-bladed teetering rotor system. Handling-wise, I find it responds properly. It's a little slow to react and respond, so you have to be ahead of the machine. That's typical of this type of rotor system. You can't wait for something to happen and then make a movement. You have to anticipate what the helicopter's doing, and you have to be ahead of it in order to stay in control. You're flying the helicopter's not flying you. You keep that in your head, and you'll have an easy go with the Huey. It's very easy to control because it does not require a lot of cyclic movement. And actually my first hour or so in the Huey, I struggled a little bit because I was actually moving the cyclic a little bit too much, similar to how I would fly a Robinson, like an R22 or an R44, where I have most of my experience. We call it the Robbie wobble, right? You kind of stir the cyclic a bit on a Robinson because they're so reactive and very twitchy. Where the Huey, you don't really need to move the cyclic that much. It's much more stable. So slow down your movements and it will become much easier to fly. I love the ground vehicles in Microsoft Flight Simulator, how they don't yield to aircraft like they do in real life, and then how they're not there in the replay, so it looks like you're going around nothing from the outside view. Anyways, all things that we hope are fixed in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. Overall, I'm very happy with this add-on and all the options that are available. I've really been enjoying the firefighting options with both the Bambi bucket and the water tank. It's explained how to use them in the manual and the extended checklist that come with the documentation. It's a ton of fun to use. Just to let that sound play for a minute, it is probably one of the best features of the add-on is the sound set. I have another video where I just left the drone camera sitting on the runway and I flew a circuit around it. The way that it sounds from different angles and different distances and approaching and departing, it's spot on. I've spent a lot of time around them. It's been a few years because there's not many of them flying anymore, but I grew up near an Air Force base and they used to fly right by my house all the time, going to their training grounds and doing practice with the Army, so I got to hear them all the time. And I also used to work line support at my local airport, and yes, the sound set, it's good. It took me right back, and I thought that I was watching the Huey fly by my parents' house again. It's great. It sounds spectacular. Now, I haven't done a full-on grognard test of the numbers to make sure that it's hitting everything perfectly, but it's hitting most everything reasonably without me having to look up performance charts and do perfect simulations of the performance tests. It's doing what I expect of it. It's performing with less power at high density altitude, and it's performing more sluggish at high useful loads, and it's a completely different helicopter to fly when you're close to the max takeoff weight than it is with just the default loadout. So it's a ton of fun. I especially enjoy doing the water drops and the firefighting because you can simulate a pickup as well as a drop, so you can actually hover down to your water source. And with the water tank, it actually takes a little bit of time to fill it up. But as you're hovering in place and the water tank is filling, you can actually feel the helicopter getting heavier, and you need to actually increase your collective to keep from dropping into whatever water source you're picking water up from. The same with the Bambi bucket. It doesn't come on slow like the water tank does when you're filling it up, but once you dip the bucket and try to lift that bucket, it requires quite a bit more power to get that bucket out of the water. So it actually makes sense, and it is even listed in the manual and the checklist that if you are going to be doing water drop operations, would be the better way to say that you reduce your fuel load to 30% so you don't accidentally overload it. The scenery that I'm actually flying for the circuit in this video was Ramona Fire Attack Base. It was recommended by one of the other beta testers who actually spent time in Huey's doing firefighting. So conversations with him were very interesting and very informative. I'll put a link to the file from flightsim.to in the description for the scenery in that base. I really like the texture work, especially in the cockpit. It does come with a light and a dark panel variant, which you can't choose. It's dependent on the livery, which is also the same for the tail rotor location, right? In some models, the early models of the UH-1H or Bell 205 had the tail rotor on the left side. And then some studies were done by Bell Engineering, and they found that the tail rotor would be more effective if it was on the opposite side and spinning in the opposite direction. So they just flipped the gearbox over. So some of the models have it on the right side. So they're both Bell 205s, they're both UH-1Hs. It's just dependent on when in the cycle they were built, whether it has a tail rotor on the left-hand side or whether it has a tail rotor on the right-hand side. There's no difference in performance modeled, so it doesn't really make a difference when you're flying it in the sim, but there would be a slight performance difference in real life where the tail rotor on the right hand side was a little bit more effective and less prone to LTE or loss of tail rotor effectiveness. But there's no difference in this model. And again, those exterior sounds are just, they're spot on. They're great. And one of the things that I know the developer is working on is the raindrops on the windshield and the windshield wipers. So I don't think it's native for Microsoft aircraft to be able to actually wipe the raindrops away, but the earlier offering from Taog's Hangar, the Llama, does have that feature, so that is something that is being worked on for the Huey. It has working wipers, but they don't really do anything. So that is something that has been mentioned by the developer. It also has really great skid feel. That's something that, you can see I decided not to set it down there, to go over the H instead, but something with the new updates from Sim Update 15, and you can notice it with the Cavalry G2, it's got great feel on the ground. You can really feel that two-stage pickup and how the helicopter responds. The skids seem to flex. You can feel where they're at. When you set it down, the left rear skid contacts first, and you can pivot it around that point, and you can really feel it. There's actually 3 contact points on the skids for this model. There's the back end, and then closer to the front, and then the toe. So you can actually do toe-in landings with it. Okay, here I'm demonstrating RBS. As you can see, it just started to roll to the left a little bit right there. You can see that my airspeed indicator is well above the red line. I had to put it in a dive to get it there. So you can recover with a little bit of right cyclic or slow down, but if you keep pushing it, it bites you. And there you go, you get the pitch up and the extreme left roll, and that is retreating blade stall. Next, we'll take a look at VRS and demonstrate that, and it is properly difficult to get into. It's really better to practice VRS at altitude, but it's really hard in the sim to tell whether you're moving or not. And if you have any airspeed in any direction, forward, backwards, sideways, it will be difficult to get into VRS because you're basically flying out of it. So here I'll demonstrate that I've got a below ETL airspeed, I have power applied, and my descent rate is above 500 feet per minute. And it'll start to get into VRS and start descending very quickly. There it goes. And then to recover, you just fly out of it. Okay, that pretty much covers everything in the Huey. If you pick it up, I know you'll enjoy it, so I can wholeheartedly put my stamp on it. Be safe, be kind, and I'll see you in the next video.